The late afternoon sun bathed the Houston skyline in a golden haze as Flight 721 began its slow descent. Through the oval window, General Cassandra Miles sat motionless, her profile carved in quiet resolve. Her eyes did not follow the shifting clouds or the tiny homes below. They fixed on something far beyond, an ache that stretched across memory and loss. She wore her full-dress uniform, not out of ceremony but out of principle. The deep navy fabric, the silver stars, the rows of gleaming ribbons, all had once armored her against every closed door and whispered insult. Today, though, they hung on her shoulders like grief itself. In 30 years of service, Cassandra Miles had led combat operations across continents, earned the Medal of Honor, and shattered ceilings few dared glance toward. But nothing had prepared her for this, returning home to bury her only son. First Lieutenant Darius Miles, Army Intelligence, 27 years old, had died during a routine mission in Syria. At least, that was the official statement. But even in death, his silence whispered, too tidy, too convenient. And now, even before she could lower his body into the ground, suspicion stirred within her. As the plane touched down, Cassandra gathered her military folder, standard documents, deployment records, and flag presentation authorization. She tucked the small thumb drive her father had mailed her into the side pocket of her briefcase. It bore Darius's handwriting. For Mom, trust no one in uniform but her. She hadn't yet opened it, not fully, not yet. There would be time, she told herself that. The terminal at Houston Intercontinental was buzzing with the orchestrated chaos of delayed flights and fast goodbyes. Cassandra walked with practiced grace, measured, upright, her heels clicking like a metronome of duty. Even in her grief, she was unshakable, or so it seemed. That illusion ended at security checkpoint 4. Random screening, the officer announced, his voice flat, almost bored, but his eyes, cold, pale blue, and too long lingering, betrayed something else. His name tag read, R. Halter. Cassandra offered her ID, her orders, and calmly explained, I've already passed security in D.C. This is a direct transfer. I'm here on urgent family matters. Halter took the idea with slow disdain, inspecting it as if it were a counterfeit. This says you're a general, he said. I am. A lieutenant general? He asked louder, his tone thick with disbelief. You expect me to believe a black woman made it that far? There was no mistaking the volume now. Passengers behind her shifted uncomfortably. A mother pulled her child closer. No one spoke. I have full clearance. These documents are verified by Department of Defense protocol, Cassandra said, her voice steady but clipped. I think we need enhanced questioning, Halter declared, waving over two other officers. Possible identity fraud, uniform theft. 2 hours. That's how long she stood under fluorescent lights, stripped of her jacket and dignity, her ribbons laid out on a plastic tray like stolen trinkets. Every credential was questioned, every medal dismissed as decoration. When her daughter Elena arrived, attorney, civil rights advocate, fire and steel and heels, Halter threatened to arrest her for obstruction. By the time they were finally released, Cassandra said nothing. Not until they were outside. You need to file immediately, Elena fumed. There are 3 witnesses. That was harassment, Mom. That was criminal. But Cassandra's voice was soft, final. Not yet. Not now. We bury Darius first. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Halter wasn't just a small man on a power trip. As they walked away, he pulled out a burner phone, dialed a number, and said only, Target confirmed. The general is here. On the other end, a gravelly voice answered, Good. The regulators send their regards. The Miles family home in Houston's historic Third Ward stood like a testament to something stubborn, something unyielding. Its red brick exterior had weathered decades of Texas heat and social change. Inside, memories clung to the walls like framed medals. 3 generations of military service, smiling in sepia and color alike. But today, the house breathed in hushed tones. Grief alters acoustics. Cassandra moved through it like a soldier through a field already mapped in her mind. She didn't flinch when passing Darius's photo in the hallway. She didn't touch the folded flag delivered too early. But in the solitude of her old bedroom, still preserved with shelves of school trophies and faded war novels, she allowed herself to exhale. The thumb drive. It rested quietly on her desk. Click. The screen blinked awake. And then, pages. Dozens of documentaries meticulously labeled. Testimonies, officer names, photos, deployment orders, surveillance stills. In one folder labeled The Regulators, the screen filled with images of law enforcement officers, many of them in uniform, standing together smiling with pride. But these weren't PR photos. They were surveillance captures, hidden meetings, private backroom gatherings. And there, twice, maybe 3 times, stood Officer Halter, always near the center, always unmasked. A sound at the door broke her trance. Elena entered, holding 2 cups of coffee and a single printed envelope. Her voice was lower now. "Mom, this came to the house. No return address." Cassandra opened it, a hand-drawn sketch of a military funeral, a crude figure standing by the case labeled "You." A red target circled the head. No words, no signature. But one fingerprint was smudged at the bottom edge. A partial print, smudged but unmistakable in its pattern. Standard police issue fingerprint ink. Whoever sent it didn't care to hide the message. It wasn't about secrecy, it was about warning her. She said nothing. Instead, she turned her attention to the documents again. Her son had uncovered something. A network. A system. Not just racism, coordination. She highlighted one name, Chief Dennis Langley, head of Houston Police Internal Affairs. A longtime ally of community reform on paper, but in Marcus's files a different portrait. Passive approval, strategic delays, deflection of internal investigations into the regulators. Elena leaned in. "There's more, Mom." "What is it?" "We got a call from a cemetery groundskeeper. His name is Michael Boone. Said he needs to speak to you. Urgent. It's about the burial site." That evening, Cassandra drove alone to Jefferson Memorial Cemetery, one of Texas's oldest military resting grounds. Marble headstones glinted under the amber sky. The Valor section, reserved for decorated service members, rested on a hill facing the west. That's where Darius was meant to be. Michael Boone waited under a cedar tree near the administration building. Mid-60s, calloused hands, grief in his eyes. "General Miles," he said quietly, "I worked with your son." "You knew Darius?" "My boy Daniel served with him in Syria. They were like brothers. Daniel didn't make it back either." Cassandra's voice was soft. "I'm sorry." Boone looked down, then back up, gaze firm. "I heard from the front office that they were going to move Darius's burial site to East Garden. They said the Valor section was full." Cassandra's expression didn't change, but her spine straightened. "You know what East Garden is?" Boone continued. "They renamed it decades ago, but it was the colored section back then. People in town still whisper that name." "They think I'll let that pass?" she asked, her tone like steel wrapped in velvet. "No, ma'am," Boone said, "but there's more." He handed her a photocopy, a map of the burial grounds, dated and annotated. Circle marks were drawn not on Darius's plot, but on where Cassandra would be standing during the ceremony. Boone spoke slowly. "We had officers come here yesterday. They asked questions about the seating, the camera lines, the positions of the honor guard." She studied the map. "So this isn't just sabotage, it's orchestration." Boone removed his hat. I don't know what's going on, but something's not right. Cassandra folded the map, tucked it into her jacket, and offered her hand. Thank you, Mr. Boone. We'll proceed with the ceremony as planned. Even with the threats? He asked. She paused. Darius faced worse, and he never stepped back. Neither will I. Morning broke over Jefferson Memorial Cemetery in a solemn hush. A cool breeze moved through the rows of white marble headstones, like a whisper of all the stories buried beneath them. At the top of the hill, where the Valor section overlooked the western edge of Houston, a small army of workers trimmed grass to perfection. Every leaf, every petal, every stone had been commanded to obey dignity. But dignity, today, was under siege. General Cassandra Miles arrived an hour early. Her uniform, pressed to impossible precision, was a declaration, not of rank, but of resolve. She carried no flowers, no eulogy, only the weight of unfinished duty and a quiet promise. My son will be honored, no matter what stands in the way. By 9 a.m., the gates opened wide. A flood of mourners arrived, soldiers, veterans, clergy, childhood friends, black, white, brown, uniformed and not, and following close behind, police. 20 of them, all are assigned to funeral security, all handpicked by Chief Langley. Cassandra recognized faces, not just Officer Halter, but others from Marcus's surveillance files. The regulators. They weren't hiding today. They were guarding the perimeter. But it wasn't security, it was theater. She watched it unfold from a distance. White guests passed through checkpoints with polite nods. Black attendees were stopped, searched, and questioned. Random checks, they were told. Some were even turned away. One man, Marcus's former platoon sergeant, was accused of carrying an unregistered blade. It was a penknife. By 9:45, the seating had been quietly divided. White guests near the casket, black mourners pushed behind barricades, too far to hear the podium. Cassandra stood silently at the front, hands clasped behind her back. She didn't call it out. She didn't cry foul. She let the cameras roll, let the whole world see. At 10 o'clock sharp, the ceremony began. A military chaplain opened with scripture and a reflection on sacrifice. A fellow officer spoke of Marcus's leadership, his integrity, and his unwavering loyalty. A violinist performed taps so tenderly that even the doves seemed to pause mid-flight. Then, it was her turn. Cassandra stepped up to the podium, her heels cutting into damp grass like blades. Cameras clicked. The room of the dead leaned in. She didn't tremble. My son, she began, believed in an America not just worth defending, but worth transforming. He believed our uniforms meant something, that they weren't decorations, but contracts, that to wear them was to promise justice, not just obedience. From the corner of her eyes, she saw movement. Officer Halter. His steps slow, calculated, moving around the front rows, whispering into his radio. Other officers followed, positioning themselves along the edges. She continued. Marcus knew what he had uncovered. He knew what it meant to ask the questions others feared. He knew the risks of documenting patterns, filing names, and tracing money. But he did it anyway. From her jacket pocket, Cassandra withdrew a folded letter. Darius's handwriting on the front, her voice dropped into a breath of steel. This is what my son left me. His final report. His final truth. As she read from the letter, the crowd shifted. Tension, outrage, pride. The words painted a picture, a network embedded within law enforcement, dedicated to suppressing black military advancement, coordinating harassment and misinformation, even altering deployment orders. And then, Halter made his move. He marched forward, right past the honor guard, right up to the podium. His voice boomed, weapon drawn. General Miles, you need to come with me. Now. A gasp from the crowd. The flag in the hands of the honor guard stilled mid-fold. Cassandra turned. Halter shoved her back a step and raised the gun to her temple. The metal touched her skin. "This black hero crap ends today," he hissed, not caring who heard. Cameras captured it all. Gasps turned to screams. Still, the other officers did nothing. 20 men with badges, not one intervened. Cassandra didn't flinch. Through clenched teeth, she whispered, "Not today." She reached, not for a weapon, but for the folded flag that represented her son's service. Her fingertips had just brushed its corner when a single gunshot, not from Halter's weapon, but from his partner, fired into the air. "She's armed," someone shouted. "Weapon! She's resisting!" Chaos exploded. Halter tackled Cassandra into the dirt, knee on her back, metals torn from her chest. The flag slipped from her hand, landing face down in the mud beside her son's open grave. Someone screamed, "It's all on video!" But Officer Halter didn't care. "Cassandra Miles, you are under arrest for assaulting an officer and inciting public disorder." As he cuffed her, face pressed into the earth that awaited her son, Cassandra didn't struggle. She didn't beg. She only looked forward, dust in her eyes, and murmured to herself, "Let the world see." The jail cell was too bright. Its ceiling bulb buzzed without rhythm, the flickering a slow torment. The cinder block walls offered no comfort, only reflections of a uniform now stained with soil and memory. General Cassandra Miles sat on the metal bench in full dress, her shoulders still square, her head unbowed. But the one meant to rest on her son's coffin, was gone, trampled, seized as evidence. 6 hours had passed since the arrest. She had not been offered water. No phone call, no medical treatment for the gash above her temple, where Halter's gun had grazed her skin. Across the country, images of her arrest had already gone viral. A gun to a general's head at her son's funeral, in uniform on American soil. But inside Harris County Jail, no headlines reached her. Only the cold hum of a system engineered to strip power from even the most decorated among them. The door clanked open. A female corrections officer entered, nameplate reading, Jackson. Her steps were sharp, but her eyes did not match her posture. There was hesitation, something unspoken. "General Miles," she said, her voice clipped, but not cruel, "you're being transferred to the general population. The judge has denied bail pending further review." Cassandra met her eyes calmly. "On what grounds?" Jackson didn't answer immediately. Instead, she lowered her voice. "Attempted assault with a deadly weapon, threatening an officer, public endangerment, and attempted murder." A pause. Jackson added quietly, "There's no record of you drawing any weapon." "Because I didn't," Cassandra replied. "I know," the officer said, eyes flicking to the corner camera. "But they're building a story. From the top." As Cassandra stood, her movements were automatic, military precision, even in captivity. She had trained prisoners of war to resist psychological breakdown. She recognized the tactics now: sleep deprivation, isolation, humiliation. They were trying to break her, not to extract information, but to erase her credibility before the real battle even began. The walk down the corridor was long and slow. Inmates peered out of their cells, whispers trailing in her wake. "That's the general." She was arrested at her son's funeral. She didn't cry. Not once. In the mess hall, the dynamic shifted. Not every face was hostile. Some nodded subtly. Others watched with a strange kind of reverence. One woman stepped forward, tall, muscular, a braided crown of gray hair. Her jumpsuit bore the name Teresa W. "My brother served under you in Iraq," she said softly. Cassandra didn't respond, not with words. She offered a respectful nod, the only language she needed. He said you were the one who brought them all back. You didn't leave anyone behind. Teresa extended a hand. You won't be left alone here either. Within an hour, Cassandra had a silent circle around her. Women with family in uniform, veterans turned victims of the justice system, daughters of men who never returned. They gave her the larger blanket, saved a seat at meals, passed her what little comfort they had. That night, Officer Jackson returned during the late shift, a tray in her hand. Inside, hidden beneath cornbread and an apple, was a burner phone. You've got 5 minutes, she whispered. Don't say my name. Don't stay on too long. Cassandra didn't hesitate. She dialed Elena. Mom? Elena's voice cracked. You're okay? There are protests. FBI's already involved. It's everywhere. Videos, statements, support from vets, from the Pentagon. Elena, Cassandra interrupted calmly. Judge Langley is connected. He's part of it. They're trying to isolate me before I can act. Tell Agent Blake to look into my son's file on judicial influence. It's all in the thumb drive. We're on it, Elena replied, and you're not alone. A commotion echoed down the hall, voices shouting, boots storming. Cassandra ended the call, slid the phone back into the tray. Seconds later, guard burst into the cell block. Surprise inspection, beds overturned, belongings scattered, comfort stripped. The lead guard leaned down toward her as her blanket was confiscated. The regulators send their regards, General. Cassandra didn't blink. She had seen worse in Kandahar. She had survived worse in Washington. But this wasn't a war zone. This was home. And they were trying to make her forget that. The knock came at dawn. Cassandra Miles, still in her prison-issued jumpsuit, stood calmly as Officer Jackson unlocked the cell. You're being released, she said quietly. Cassandra raised an eyebrow. Why? Federal order. The judge was overruled. Agent Blake is waiting outside. By the time she escaped through the jail's front doors, the sun had begun to rise, and with it, a city on its feet. Hundreds of veterans, many in uniform, stood silently outside, forming a cordon of respect. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. But Cassandra moved forward in silence, flanked by Elena and Agent Jordan Blake. In a secure van, Blake spoke quickly. We executed simultaneous raids early this morning, he said. We have recordings, testimonies. The entire structure's cracking. Officer Chen, your son's partner, survived. He made it to us, and he had the files. Cassandra nodded once. What about Langston? Blake handed her a tablet. On the screen, Senator Gerald Langston, red-faced, was being led away in cuffs by federal agents. He's being charged with conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and negligent homicide. And that's just the beginning. A beat passed, Cassandra exhaled. Not relief, just readiness. At noon on the steps of the federal courthouse, General Cassandra Miles stood before a wall of cameras. Her uniform had been restored, her voice unshaken. My son, First Lieutenant Darius Miles, died believing in the potential of this nation. He uncovered a network dedicated to silencing that belief. He was right. They were real. And no, they are exposed. She looked directly into the lens. This is not just about a son or a mother. This is about every black soldier who gave more than they were ever owed, and every citizen who's been told to wait for justice until it's more convenient. Behind her stood Elena. Officer Chen, still recovering, nodded from a wheelchair. Agent Blake, arms crossed, watched the crowd swell with applause. Across the country, the impact was immediate. Headlines read, General breaks the silence. Top officials arrested in discrimination network. The regulators dismantled. Justice at last for Darius Miles. The president called personally, a formal apology, an invitation to complete Darius's funeral. this time at Arlington National Cemetery, with full military honors. But Cassandra declined. My son's legacy doesn't belong in silence. It belongs where it began, among the people who fought for him. Instead, 1 year later, Jefferson Memorial Cemetery became the site of a new memorial, the Wall of Unseen Sacrifice, honoring soldiers whose careers were quietly erased or targeted because of their race. The ceremony was quiet, dignified. Cassandra stood beneath the flag, her shoulders once again bearing stars, now four. Officer Halter had been sentenced to life in prison. Chief Langley, 20 years. Senator Langston, awaiting trial on federal charges with national implications. But for Cassandra, justice was not a sentence. It was a signal. As the last guest departed the memorial, Cassandra remained, one hand on her son's headstone, one of the flags that had finally returned to her. We finished it. What you started, she whispered. The wind moved gently across the field. No trumpet, no orders, just peace, and the knowledge that a uniform, worn with truth, could still change the course of history. Message of the story: true justice demands courage not only to speak, but to stand when silence would be easier. One voice, guided by truth and honor, can expose even the deepest systems of power and prejudice.